and welcome to the ACISTE Community Conversation. My name is Elizabeth Sabet, and I'm the current president of ACISTE, the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. And I'm really excited about today's community conversation. Katrina Michelle, our executive director, will be on in just a moment to introduce our topic. But for those of you that are not familiar with ACISTE, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports spiritual experiencers, those people who've had nonlinear, non-ordinary states of consciousness, spiritual experiences that may be having either a challenge in integrating them or just looking for community, somebody to talk to about their experiences that might understand and provide a non-judgmental ear to share their experience. We also have an annual conference once a year for researchers to come present their research on spiritually transformative experiences. And we talk about the therapeutic issues that can occur with these types of experiences. And we also train mental health professionals, spiritual guidance counselors, and life coaches on how to work with experiencers professionally. We also have an online experiencer forum. I think we're close to 900 people on that forum right now. And so it is private, it is not a social media platform. And so if you are a spiritual experiencer and would like a safe online space to talk about your experiences, you can email me at info@aciste.org. And our website is www.aciste.org. So I'd like to introduce our executive director, Katrina Michelle. Katrina is a holistic psychotherapist in New York City and our current executive director. Katrina?
Good to be with all of you today. We started these community conversations, I believe, a year ago now as a way to bring in more of our online community and really continue this conversation outside of our annual conference and bring it into a space where everyone can participate on a regular basis. There are so many topics that we cover and so many issues facing the field. And ACISTE is really here to meet the integration needs of experiencers. And we do that through research and education and support in various ways. So today we thought it would be good for you to get a sense of who ACISTE is. We are this is our board here. We were just missing one today. Dr. Suzanne Gordon, who's one of our founding board members, was unable to be with us today. She's teaching at the University of Maryland, so she's not able to be with us, and we miss her. But we do have the rest of our board here. So I'm going to encourage all of you who are watching to bring us your questions. We're here to talk with you today to get to know what's on your minds and see how we can help create a community around what's happening here in the field. So let's begin with our founder, Yolaine Stout. It's so good to have Yolaine with us today. Yolaine, would you please take a few minutes and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what brought you to bring ACISTE into existence?
Thank you, Katrina, and thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I became aware of the need of an organization after I was president of the International Association for Near-Death Studies and on their board for 6 years. And people were contacting us with all kinds of issues that they were dealing with and needing support. But that organization didn't have a systematic way of understanding the problems they had, the issues they were facing, or a method of dealing with that. So that's where my heart went, was with experiencers. So for me, it's the experience can't be extracted, separately studied isolated from the experiencer, his life and so forth, what went on before, what went on after. All of those things play a role in how we integrate them. So that's where my heart went, and we got started in, oh my gosh, when did we get started? In 2000. Spent a couple of years in strategic planning, studying experiencers and their needs, doing our own preliminary research, and things have taken off since then, and I'm so grateful to the rest of the board who are just as passionate as I am and dedicated, and I'm thrilled to see where we're going.
Wonderful, Yolene. So good to have you with us today. You're in California right now and on your way to Hawaii. So our board spans the country. We're really fortunate.
And hence the moving boxes behind me. I'm so sorry. Yes, I'm moving.
Yes, it's real life. It's real life. We're behind the scenes today. So, okay. And Dina Verano is one of our board members. Would you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to get involved with ACISTE.
Sure. I'm representing the Midwest contingent of ACISTE, and I am a transformational counselor and psychotherapist in Indiana, and do a wide variety of work with folks over many, many years. And my interest in ACISTE and this whole topic really got started when I started to experience all kinds of non-ordinary experiences that I was completely unprepared for. And it was taking place over a series of years, which is fairly common as well. It can be one experience or it can be many experiences over many years. And a colleague had sent the ACISTE conference link back in 2016. And I read what ACISTE was about, and I said, I have got to be there. And so that was the first conference I went and met so many warm-hearted and wonderful colleagues and friends. And that just was the beginning of my involvement. I'm also the newsletter editor. So if any of you out there have ideas or things you'd like to write about and see us publish in the newsletter, feel free to reach out. Again, you could reach out at info@aciste.org, or you could write me directly at dina@dinaverano.net.
That's great, Dina. Thank you. Yes, it's been so wonderful to have your support on the board. You've really been a gift to us. I also want to introduce Lydia Perez, who's not with us today. She's going to actually be joining the board, and she's in San Antonio, Texas. And our other person from Texas, of course, is our president, Elizabeth Sabet. Elizabeth, why don't you just give us a brief reminder of who you are and what brought you to ACISTE?
Well, I work as a transformational transpersonal coach in Lubbock, Texas, in West Texas. And I started a local community called HOPE, Holistic Options for People Everywhere. And I co-founded it with a couple of friends in 2007. And Lubbock, Texas at the time, it still is ultra conservative. However, at that time, it was even more ultra conservative than it is now. We had no yoga studios in the city at that time. We have a lot of yoga in the city now. It was just basically, if you weren't a traditional Christian, there was no place for you to be different. And so the city needed some place for people to be safe and be different. So HOPE was a place for, if you were different religiously or spiritually or gender, sexual differences, if you were different and didn't have a place in Lubbock, you were welcome at HOPE. And so we tended to collect a lot of spiritual experiencers, people who've had, nonlinear, non-ordinary states of consciousness experiences. And I set up support groups for people at that time. We had several different kinds of support groups. And in 2012 or 2011, one of the people in our group needed therapy, marriage therapy, for some problems related to her spiritual emergence experience. It was causing problems in her marriage. And we could not find a mental health professional here in town. And she brought me the work of Dr. Stanislav Grof, and she said, you need to read this, and HOPE needs to do something about this. And I read it, and I went the Stormy Search for Self. by Stan and Christina Groth. And I was like, you're absolutely right, we do. And so I began looking for somebody who could train mental health professionals on the difference between psychosis and spiritual emergence and emergency experiences. And we found Dr. Janice Holden at the University of North Texas. And she said, well, I'd be happy to do that for you. And you need to talk to Elaine Stout of ACISTE in California. She's doing the same thing on a national level that you're doing locally. And so I called Elaine, and she was extremely gracious and kind and excited to help me with my conference. And then she invited us to co-sponsor the conference in 2014, and I joined the board in 2015. So, and the rest is history.
To have you with us. You're really tireless in your efforts to support all of the many programs we have going on here.
Thanks. I'm so grateful to be a part of ACISTE and for everybody that founded it and did the research and continues to do the work that they do. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I'm Katrina Michelle, and I'm a clinical social worker here in New York City. And I became involved with ACISTE when I was working on my PhD at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, now Sophia University in Palo Alto, California. And I began volunteering with ACISTE as a part of my coursework there, and was just really blown away by the first conference. I felt like I had found my people, and I was just so grateful that there was an organization with professionals who were doing the academic research, many of us clinicians, many not, but most of us also being experiencers. And it was just a unique community, and I've continued to have that experience at our conference every year. And I'm really just grateful to have joined the board in 2017 when I finished my dissertation and began to figure out life outside of school again. And it's been a great experience to work with all of you and to get to know so many people. So I think it'd be great to talk about what's going on in the field currently. We do have some questions that came in, and I would encourage those of you watching to please send in your questions for us with the Q&A box there, and hopefully we'll have time to get to them. First, I'd like to begin by asking Elaine to talk a little bit about ACISTE in regards to how and why it started. I'm going to read a question that came into us, and I'd like you to consider that in your answer. So the question that came in, and again, it's sort of reflective of how people are understanding us now. I know ACISTE began mostly from a need of the near-death community to come together. It seems that now there are other examples of STEs, be it psychosis, mental health, trauma, or loss of a loved one that are triggering these experiences. This is presenting an even more diverse community. How do you see ACISTE rising to this opportunity to grow, address all these issues, and embrace the growing sub-communities? And why do you think that these are only more recently showing up?
Thank you for the question. It's frequently asked question actually at our conferences. When I was, although I was on the board of the near-death experience community, the research there showed at least half of them were having the same experience and the after effects or the integration problems as, but they had not been near death. So they were in fact nowhere near death. They may have been washing the dishes when all of a sudden they're gone out of their consciousness and out of their body, have a life review, all of the sort of typical features that you would normally only read from someone who was near death or clinically dead. So that was an eye-opener. And so I went into researching initially how many Americans have this, and there have been numerous studies, depending on the definition you use, but I think the closest is by the University of Chicago poll that took maybe between 5 and 15% of the population, depending on which poll you use, and I forget the exact number there. But the question was, have you had an experience that, a spiritual or religious experience that transformed your life? And so that was the key thing. And found out these are quite common, these experiences. If we take away the label near death, it's not about the body. It's about the experience that we found in our research with ACISTE can happen to anybody at any time under any physical circumstance. So I've come to a theory, and I really would love to see this theory tested out, that I think people who have these experiences, quote unquote, need them. That the other side, the spiritual side, says, okay, time for an intervention here, or need for some guidance, need for some change in the viewpoint. And so really it's about the effect of the experiencer on their life, on their whole life, that is important. The circumstances of physical circumstances are irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. I mean, look at people have them while they're meditating, you know, or driving a car. So anyway, so we, when we formed ACISTE, we called it spiritually transformative experience, not, and that's an umbrella term for whatever name you want to call it, to cover if you define it as spiritual, meaning your values are going to change. You have dealing with this, with the spiritual world, or other name if you want to call it the other realities, and it changed your life, hence the word transformative, or numerous experiences. That's our definition. So we don't have to go, well, how close to death were you? You know, were they there with the monitors and all of that? You know, to an experiencer, all that is irrelevant. What happened in the experience and how it impacted your life is what's important. That's why we're here.
Yeah, thank you, Yolene. It's really a beautiful mission. Does anyone else on the board want to comment on that question about these other STEs beyond the near-death experience, which of course most people are familiar with in the mainstream, and these growing sub-communities that our person who asked the question was asking about?
I would like to add something, Katrina, if I could. Kind of picking up on that question of, I forget how the writer phrased it, but in terms of, are there more of these experiences happening, right? You know, certainly there's some research and interest in that. Stephen Taylor's work in England has been very focused on that. There's a wonderful book called The Leap that addresses that issue. And some would say that, yes, the globe and the planet is beginning to seem to really percolate, that there's some kind of quickening here of spiritual emergence or awakening, if you will, that seems to be happening. And, you know, as I reflect on that, I think about partly, you know, we have a lot more people doing contemplative practice in this time of the world, and the connections through the internet with all kinds of teaching also seems to make it a little bit more likely that one might have these kinds of experiences. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the thing about enlightenment is an accident and meditation makes you accident prone, right? So to the degree that people are doing yoga and qigong and tai chi and meditating in various forms, I think that's also maybe, I mean, that's kind of my pet hypothesis, that there's a support for this to happen. And like Yolaine was also saying, I think that there may be a call, right? I mean, just at a kind of fundamental level, humanity needs to wake up if we're going to survive, right? And so maybe there is some call from a spiritual direction that people begin to have more and more of these experiences so that we're able to respond to the crisis that we're in, you know? So those are some thoughts that come to mind for me. I don't know if there's other things that others of you might say about that.
Yeah, thanks, Dina. Good points. Elizabeth, do you have some thoughts?
Well, I just wanted to agree with Dina. I do think that more people meditating and doing mindfulness practices and contemplative practices, I do think that's a huge part of it. And I also agree that we are in the process of getting a kick in the pants, perhaps, from the Creator, you know, to save the creation and do our part, you know, to be responsible for being good stewards of this beautiful life and beautiful planet that we've all been given. And there is a greater focus on mental wellness. We are evolving as a society. We have more free time. You know, in the early 1900s, even mid 1900s, the focus was on survival, physical survival, and increasing materially. And as we increase materially as a society, that leaves more space to contemplate what's more now. What after this? After we've reached a certain level of material success, what is next? Because in itself, it's very empty. And people who have lived in poverty and they've worked really hard and they've made it to a certain level of financial success commonly experience like, and now what? I thought I was supposed to be happy now. So there's that deeper inner search that happens just naturally as we evolve as a society.
Yeah, this is something, if I can inject here, that I believe is a critical area of research that if we look at an individual, if we take individuals' experience and what was going on in their lives at what time, what value, what messages, what happened in their experience that led them to change. And in our early research, one of the challenges, the biggest challenges people face afterwards is finding your purpose. So, because many people are told you have a purpose in life. And generally you get the feeling it's never very specific, or maybe it is in some cases, but in a lot of cases that's people don't know what to do, but they sense it has to do with love. In its sense, it has to do with helping the world in some way. And so that's overall a frequent message to help the world. So the research I'd like to see is what was going on in that person's life, how did it change them, and what are they doing today that they feel is their purpose, if they feel they found it, and see what those common threads are. Initially, just a small study, we saw that lots of experiencers go into hospice, or they'll go into a caring capacity, becoming mental health professionals or becoming caregivers, better parents, or, you know, environmentalists or writers, you know. And so I'd love to see those kinds of threads researched. Might tell us why it's more, why it is on the increase that some studies show that these experiences are having more and more frequently.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. And any researchers that might be watching this, please get in touch with us if you want to connect or collaborate on research related to this area, I think it's something we can certainly help out with and take an interest in. And yeah, I really, I think that all of us are experiencers, whether or not we choose to acknowledge it, whether or not we use this language. I think that we're all having spiritual experiences. We're all having moments that are giving us a glimpse of something beyond the material reality. And I think that we don't always recognize the transformational piece there because our culture is not yet equipped to manage that. So William James talked about having that sudden experience, such as an NDE, but there's also the educational experience. And I see it as part of human development. I think it's natural evolutionary process. And I think that the more of us that talk about our experiences, that do research and help other people, recognize that their own experiences are valid, I think this is what helps to catalyze more growth and more openings and bring more cohesion to all of this. So I think we're doing what we can to get that message out there. Okay, so our next question, I'm going to read it as it came in, and I'd like to see who would like to comment on the board. So this question asks, what are we supposed to do after a spiritual or NDE experience? There is a purpose, or must we just accommodate and live naturally in the world? What can we do when we have a lot of energy and we feel in between worlds? How can we integrate love into the world? Are we ill, or is it a normal evolution process? So I think, again, these are some of the questions that come up for people who are having an experience. Anybody on the board like to comment on that? Elizabeth, yes.
Yeah, I would. I run the peer support group facilitator training. And these are the kind of questions that experiencers bring into our forum and into the support groups that our facilitators are running. And as a facilitator of support groups, we don't answer those questions for people. We don't project our own ideas about those questions. We create a safe space for them to answer, to go deep within themselves and to dialogue amongst each other to find out what is true for one and share that and allow them the open space to figure that out for themselves. But the answers to those questions require support. To be alone and solitary and ask those questions can be very, very challenging and feel very isolating. And we know through the prior research from ACISTE that some of the severe challenges that can happen when you have an experience is substance abuse as a way of mitigating that pain and isolation or the questions that may come, and many other challenges, suicide attempts or successful suicide attempts, and the divorce rate's very high. So when we can provide support for people to have those questions answered within themselves, I've discovered that most people actually do have those answers within themselves, and they just need somebody to hold that space.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. I think that's so true, and there are many different ways that we can hold the space. And ACISTE has had these different certification opportunities for different fields based on the needs of the experiencers. So right now we have our training certification for mental health professionals. We have our certification for coaches, for spiritual guidance counselors, and now also for peer facilitators. So if anyone's interested in getting any more information about those opportunities, please be in touch with us. Dina or Elaine, do you have any thoughts about that question about some of the needs that come up, some of the questions that come up after an experience?
Yeah, there's those are very common questions that are asked. The 6 challenges that we found were one is dealing with now the reality that there is more than one reality. So having a foot in both worlds sometimes, feeling like life is a dream, and also being homesick. So homesick, not wanting to be here, not accepting the fact that we're here, and maybe the experience was full of light and love, and here is of course not always the case. And so that's one of the challenges. And the other one is, who do you talk to about this? So initially you may be shut down, invalidated, having your experience renamed, redefined, told what to do about it, and have it interpreted, and you realize it's really tough. I mean, like Elizabeth mentioned, divorce rate, sharing with anybody, friends can leave you. They think you're weird. You can be pathologized. You can be demonized. You can be isolated. So that's why ACISTE made it very important. That was the #1 requested thing when we asked experiences, how can we help you? And they said support and discussion groups was #1. And another program we will be rolling out eventually, as we're gearing up to, is a mentorship program, a volunteer, peer-to-peer, one-on-one, self-selected type of group where, again, Elizabeth said this, to create a safe space. So we have some rules and some guidelines that would come up, that in our support system, we do not, what might be invalidating, and we do not proselytize. In other words, again, as Elizabeth says, we don't know what your purpose is. We don't know everything, why it happened to you. We don't know. We're not going to do that interpretation for you. We create a safe space for that to come forth. Another challenge that people deal with is integrating values. So about love. Now maybe you're working in a corporate world where it's all about money, and that's now become extremely difficult, if not impossible. I'm not saying that happens to every experiencer, but that's a frequent one. And those, again, is something to talk about, share in a support group. Another one to mention is the high energy or supernatural gifts that somebody has. They're now seeing auras, or they're feeling people's energy, dealing with the onslaught of that. Well, how do you deal with that? And we don't have the answer, but other experiencers in a group setting, like someone who's worked on it, may have some ideas. And again, Elizabeth said this, you'll know the answers. I believe if we create a space, people will resonate, will know what's true for them and what's not on a deeper level. So another one is, finding that purpose. I had mentioned that before. So that's the big one. And if people feel that's too overwhelming, or they don't know what it is, then they may become homesick again, because they don't know why they're back. They don't know why they're here. So these are all things that come up in support groups. So important that people come together, peers, in a safe place where you're not going to be invalidated. You're not going to be told how to think, how to believe, but just simply sharing it and bringing it forth.
Well said, Yolene. Beautiful. Tina, do you have some thoughts?
Could I add something there? Yeah, could I add something there? I think what I would also say is, I think there is something so important in that kind of support that comes in, like, normalizing the experience, no matter how extraordinary it may seem. This is a very normal, natural human capacity that we have to have these kinds of experiences. And so I think that just, even if your experience doesn't exactly match someone else's experience, just knowing that this is even possible is very calming, I think, to people. And I think in that the kind of open, supportive space, whether that's officially in some kind of peer group or it is happening because you've started to collect a group of people that you know and feel comfortable with sharing these experiences and maybe hearing some of their experiences, that it can be helpful to recognize that you're on an unfolding journey now. I mean, we always are in our lives, but there's something about these very spiritually transformative experiences that seem to catalyze an evolving journey. And so, I think it's important that part of that support is be open to what comes to help you sort through those answers, in the form of books, other people, synchronicities, all the things that are going to help you not only to integrate what's happened, but also what may be opening up as you kind of deepen into your understanding of the impact of this experience on your life.
Yeah, if I could just interject, Dina, you made an excellent point about people's different experiences. That one of the things we saw was people wanting initially to hear that someone had the same experience, very similar experience to them. And they can sometimes be disappointed when they can't find somebody who had, maybe even a certain element in their experience that they hadn't heard anybody else having this, and they feel alone with that among experiencers. And it's very important to understand that we've never found two experiences that are identical. They're all unique, and maybe to the point to say they're custom designed for you and only you. And so that you get it in the way you need to get it, and that's just hypothesis. But the truth is that the facts are no two experiences are alike, and that makes it special.
Absolutely. So now we'd like to bring on somebody who's watching with us who has a question. John Mathis, let's see if we can get you on camera to ask your question. Okay. Hi, John. Thanks for joining us. John, can you unmute your mic?
How about now? Is that better?
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for joining us. Please, what's your question for the board?
So I was wondering, has there been any kind of advance with working with folks who have had exposure to ayahuasca or ketamine? I'm a nurse by training, and there are 4 ketamine clinics that are open now in the Raleigh-Durham area. And because of my exposure to different groups here in the Raleigh-Durham area since 2011, I'm finding these people are kind of trickling towards me, and I basically come at them and say, well, it's a spiritually transformative experience, which is a type of out-of-body experience, and out-of-body experiences have been part of the human existence as far as, look at shaman, look at mystics, look at the Aborigine. To them, it's a Tuesday. So I try to let them know that it's not all that unusual. It's just it's unusual for us. But I wondered if there was maybe some more focus towards that, especially now that with these ketamine clinics coming online, I think we're going to find more and more people are going to have that disassociative experience or that out-of-body experience, and we need to prepare for that.
Yeah, thanks for your question, John. I think it's a great question. Actually, last month's community conversation, we had our panelists, Ingmar Gorman, Alex Belser, and Richard Knowles, who are psychedelic researchers, come on and talk about some of their work, which is quite extensive. And I do think that psychedelic medicine is becoming more mainstream, and certainly it's, you know, some of the research is actually looking into how these experiences are healing precisely because they are spiritually transformative. And I think there are different ways to measure that and different scales that the researchers can speak to. So I think it is becoming something that is getting into the language, and we are currently looking at presenters for our November conference in Atlanta, and we'd love to bring some of that research to our conference. So if you're interested in sending in a proposal, please be in touch with us at info@ACISTE.org. Elizabeth, Dina, Yolene, do you have any other thoughts about John's question?
I have a quick response. One is, John, if you haven't been to our website at ACISTE.org lately, in February and March, we had two wonderful interviews with Isa Gucciardi out in San Francisco, and she's got a lot of experience with plant medicine and has a like a 5-hour introductory class on preparing for and integrating from plant medicine experiences. So that's just one example, I think, of she's a transpersonal psychologist and shamanic practitioner. I think that's one example of things that are starting to pop up around the country to help people move into these experiences, these ceremonies with more intention and with more preparation, and then help them to integrate, you know, these very powerful new insights or healing experiences in ways that help them to, you know, feel grounded and supported in that process. So there's a couple resources there as well.
Yeah, thank you, John, for that point too. We talked about this on several board meetings about the need for us to be reaching out to different groups like the ketamine clinics and yoga studios and places where experiences are more frequently show up, hospitals and so forth. It's almost an ethical issue. Like you mentioned, other cultures, it's a Tuesday. That's true. We're not prepared. This is not something you hear about anywhere. And so we're left to kind of find each other. And so anyway, where these experiences are happening, it's very important that who's ever leading a group be aware of our organization or other ones that where a person who, if they have an experience as a result of the ketamine or the meditation, meditation, I almost said medication, that there is a place to refer people to or be trained themselves on what to deal with. And I also wanted to mention something that has not come up yet, is some of these experiences can be absolutely frightening, can scare people. They're frightening, they're not loving, they're not full of light and love. They're quite the opposite, scary experiences. And those experiences are even among experiencers, they are afraid to come forward and out of the fear of judgment, or, you know, it's different, whatever that is. So it's important that anybody being trained be aware of those as well, and how to work with those experiencers in the best possible. It's an ethical issue. So if we're creating an environment where these experiences happen, but we don't know how to help somebody that has that, there needs to be some help for when that happens.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be here in Durham, so I have both IONS and the Rhine Research Center literally 5 miles away from where I live. And so when I pop into those places, people get directed to me. And so that's why I find up having those conversations, but lately those conversations have turned towards ayahuasca and ketamine. And I knew ketamine as an anesthesia medicine, but I didn't know it was being used for PTSD and a couple other things. But what I also discovered is that there are some underground groups doing ayahuasca, and the same thing. They're not prepared for that disassociative experience. And having been involved with IONS, you know that not every situation is love and light, and some of them are, terrifying. So it's like they go through the experience and then they ask questions, as opposed to the other way around. And when I try to direct people to ACISTE, they're unfamiliar with it. And so that's why I was like, well, somehow we need to penetrate the pop culture, because everyone knows what an NDE is. No one knows what an STE is. And so there's that constant education that goes on. And so that's why I that was kind of the core of my question.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Really good to have you with us asking the question, and we look forward to addressing it more as we move along. It's really good to hear from you and what you're experiencing in your practice there. Okay, so Elizabeth, I know you're fielding some questions there. Would you like to read the next question that's come in?
Yes, let me get to it here. Okay. Sarah asks, how would you all respond to or handle the way language is changing as more and more people become aware of the terms NDE and STE? Examples. More people today seem to be using NDE to refer to major accidents or physical crises where they almost died, but did not have any of the classic NDE spiritual experiences. I've heard similar uses of STE, sort of like mindfulness is no longer a term about a specific contemplative practice, but is becoming much broader in context. So how would you all respond to or handle the way language is changing?
I think that there are many issues involving language. We're not prepared, like we said. This culture doesn't have the vocabulary or the terminology, and somehow these experiences defy labels, defy naming. So once something is labeled, then people have different definitions sometimes of what those are, and struggle with language itself. I think it's a linguistic language problem when we're talking about experiences that defy language. So people may say God, for example, in their experience, but others refer to it as the source, the light, the unconditional love. So ACISTE, for example, does not advocate labeling specific parts of the experience because it can cause confusion and invalidation to have that reframed in somebody else's words. So if we recognize that simply language itself is a communication tool, but it's not adequate to describe something as expansive and amazing. And as a person struggles with it afterwards, it's part of the struggle of sharing it is that makes it difficult. So I think it's an inadequacy of language itself. I think it's an inadequacy of our culture, of cultural differences. So the more open, I think, and accepting of people's terminology, the way they frame it, just hearing what's going on with that person, the better off we are. I remember the struggle on the IONS board. The term near is not scientific. It defies a label itself. What do you mean near death? And then the word death. So many words about death. Well, were you dead? And so anyway, we try to avoid using too many descriptor words defining it for people to avoid the invalidation of reframing it for them.
Katrina, thank you, Yolaine. I really appreciate that. I think that's such an important point. I was going to say that I think the question reminds me that you know, classically, when we talked about a dark night of the soul, that was a very particular spiritual process that was happening, and usually in the context of a kind of immense spiritual transformation. And yet now people talk about having a dark, I mean, they sort of throw out the term dark night of the soul, you know, talking about after their divorce or they're in some big grief process, or, you know, something's happening. And it does raise an interesting question. There's a part of me that wants to say, no, we've really got to kind of claim that there's something extraordinary happening here when we use these terms like spiritually transformative experience or near-death experience or whatever. And then there's another part of me that says, but people are really resonating with, you know, that's a meaningful term for them. And so who am I to lay my judgments on that? About that. So I don't have an answer, but I know that's something I kind of struggle with internally myself when I hear those terms like mindfulness or dark night of the soul or what have you, used in a more casual kind of context. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, Dina. You know, the way I see it is, yes, it would be great if we had some unifying language for all this. And these are such universal experiences, but as individuals, we have our subjective ways of understanding and interpreting them. And just like we have many dialects in the world, we have the opportunity to choose the language that resonates for us personally. So I think that's really important. I know that's one of the values that ACISTE holds, is that we're not trying to assign or categorize anybody's experience. We're really allowing them and encouraging them to find the language that works for them to express their experience, because I think that's part of the integration process. You know, when I had my experience, I had no language. It's a nonlinear experience. And I sat with that for a long time and didn't share because I didn't even know where to begin with that. And then when I somehow mumbled about it somewhere at school, finally, somebody offered me a word. And it was so profound for me because it connected. It was like, yes, that's it. You know, I had tried to play with words before, but they didn't quite work. And that one fit for me. So I think it's really important we leave it up to the experiencer. And then of course the challenge is, how do we talk about this in research? Because I think that is when it gets challenging. We're trying to research something that is so subjective and so universal, and the search terms are all over the place. But I think the more we talk about it, we'll get closer to understanding it and categorizing it for research. So I think that's the best we can do right now. But for now, I think as long as there are opportunities for language, let people use what resonates for them.
While we're on the topic of language, this is an area of research that I would love to see explored too. I asked myself, you know, why are the experiences unique? And again, you know, the language aspect of the uniqueness is, I think there's oftentimes metaphorical content in the experience. It's symbolic. And so that's a different way of expression, describing a metaphor rather than categorizing and naming it to describe it more like a story, a metaphorical thing, some things that happen, and deeper meaning in that experience. And so, for example, people talk about the tunnel in the experience. Well, each of us brings up a different image of a tunnel, what that looks like. And some of us then think that your image is what that other person saw, or they'll try to say, well, this person didn't have a tunnel experience, but but when you read the accounts, the tunnels are completely different. They could be a cave, or they could be a whirlwind, like a tube of wind, or they could be a subway tunnel complete with tiles, quite literal tunnel. So we ask ourselves why. There's some research has been done why on other cultures the so-called tunnel doesn't appear in other experiences in other cultures, non-Western cultures. They're in Western cultures and in European experiences and American experiences. And they're not as common, but they are more commonly here. We don't hear about them in other cultures. And Mia is a former English major and teacher for 25 years. I was always interested in metaphors in other languages. We have a phrase in English called "there's a light at the end of the tunnel." That exists in German, French, Italian. There's that phrase. Well, what does it mean? It means there's hope at the end of darkness. There's hope and love, and so the experience is bringing, to expressing to that experiencer, don't worry, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Where in other cultures they may have, a different language content over that. So this whole topic of language is not just defining with words, it's the meaning and the image and the metaphorical content possibly of surrounding that language.
Thank you, Yolene. That was very beautifully said. Very beautifully said. I have a question here from a clergyman. He states, I am a clergy person and involved in spiritual direction. Does ACISTE offer any ways for those of us with a religious perspective to be involved? Not to proselytize, but simply to offer some of the guidance that many of the world's religious traditions offer. And the answer to that is yes, we do. We offer a spiritual guidance director certification at our annual conference every year. And then there's a process to finalize your certification by going to monthly meetings after that. And so we've had several people go through that certification process. If you go online to our website and go under the support directory, you'll find all the helping professionals that have been certified through ACISTE that are actually on the website. There are more that have not chosen to put up a page on our website that have been certified, but if you're looking for somebody specifically that you would like to work with, you can find that person on our website. So Terry, yes, we would encourage you to contact us about the conference this fall and get more information about that program, and we could even connect you to the person who's going to be facilitating that training and certification process as well. Do any of you want to say anything about the specifics about that spiritual guidance director program? Elaine, I know you were involved with creating the policies and procedures for that.
Yeah, so one of the things from our early research shown the need when we asked what experiencers, can we help them? And there was definitely a need, and this is just important, I think, important that people do to them, depending on your experience, see it as a religious experience. And need spiritual guidance in the context of their religion. They need to understand it within they have a need to understand it. They desire to see it within the context of their particular religion. So it became part of our policies and procedures and values that we're not saying you have to be non-denominational as a spiritual guidance counselor. Just need to state it in your profile that you come from this tradition. And so experiencers who are working with that type of experience within the context of their religion and want to speak to somebody within their religion can find you. It's very, very important to make that aware of that capacity.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's so important that experiencers have an opportunity to speak from the worldview that they're coming from, that they resonate with. So if you're working from a particular religious stance and you can help somebody make sense of it through that language and that imagery, I think it's really important that you're letting people know you're someone that they can talk to. I think oftentimes people who are religious and in religious communities really struggle with being labeled as evil or possessed, or you know, and their experiences are shut down and dismissed by the community or condemned. So I think that as somebody who's interested in working with people who are undergoing these experiences, it's really essential for you to be open about that. And we'd love to help, you know, get you certified and get you listed with us on our website so that people can find you. I think it's really important.
So Katrina, it doesn't look like we have any other questions coming in. I see somebody with their hand raised under the attendees. And if you, the person that has their hand raised, if you want to come on camera or just ask your question, just send us a message in the Q&A and we'll be happy to get you on. What I'd like to do now is just give members of the board an opportunity to talk about anything that they feel like is important, that they would like to let people know about as far as ACISTE is concerned, or anything in the field of research that you think it's important for our viewers to know about at this time.
Well, I think it's important that we talk about what the future of ACISTE is and what we're looking to do. I know that Yolene and Suzanne and the founding members, all volunteers, have done an exceptional job setting up so many different programs and offerings, and it's almost unfathomable to me how there was so much set up in addition to an annual conference. So we really have a lot to offer. And I think part of the conversation that we're having today is about what else do we need? What other needs are out there that we can help serve experiencers by looking to meet, and also just letting people know of all the offerings we do have and what we do have going on. So Yolene, I wonder if there's anything that you would like to speak to as the founder who had this long-term vision for ACISTE in terms of where you see us now, and maybe what your vision is for us in the next maybe 5 years.
Yeah, we're undergoing sort of an informal strategic planning right now, but implementing the results of our first strategic plan. And as I mentioned, the final program that we haven't done. The only piece that we haven't done yet is the peer mentorship program. So that was one key thing that we decided to begin with, training mental health professionals, because even though the smaller percentage wanted that, needed that, they were the most in need. They're struggling with maybe more severe issues, life-threatening issues, or traumatic issues. And so we needed to have, and maybe co-occurring mental issues as well. We needed to start creating that safety net at that level, and that build up to larger and larger needs of that are not as severe. So peer mentors, that is the majority, don't need a mental health professional, or maybe they don't aren't looking for any kind of professional. They're just looking for a place to share in a safe place, in like a support group, or online on our NAME forum, or one-on-one. And so seeing that, and the other need is to really connect with the research community more and get some critical questions that we have that will help our programs and and improve our training, which is one of our values, that we incorporate the latest research in our training, and so that we're always adapting, we're always learning. Because one thing that is needed, and I've said this, from the beginning, it will take some time and a lot of money, which we don't have. But the goal is to raise over maybe $150,000 to hire a university to conduct a nationwide needs assessment and to determine the scale and scope of the problem, and problem being the issues that experiencers face following or during or following their experience, and conduct this and get critical data and take this data to NIH basically, and they apply to do an on-campus conference to train them about the need for support for experiencers across the board. This is probably the largest unserved population in the US. If you don't even, how many of us are there, and what our issues are facing, and some quite severe, and there's no training in it in the mainstream, we cannot afford to stay on the fringe. So the long-term vision for ACISTE is to move away from us having to train mental health professionals to address that critical need, to have it become part of the mainstream. So if NIH gets this funding, sees the need for it, they will start putting out requests for proposals and distributing money, and getting the universities on board to apply the professors to do the research, more research. We talked about different populations within the context of, for example, people's religion, but we didn't talk about the different needs that children might have versus a teenager versus an adult. We didn't talk about where we touched on different cultures within the US. So if you come from a Hispanic culture, or you come from a Southern culture, or a religious fundamental culture, or all these have different impacts on the person. And so all of that needs to be researched. And the language aspects, as I talked about, the metaphorical content, why these experiences happen to people, at what point, what's going on in their life. There's so much research that needs to be done that ACISTE can't do it. This is a huge, this is millions of experiencers are having this experience, millions, and their needs need to be met on a huge scale, which means it needs to go mainstream. We can't afford to be on the fringe. We're not serving experiencers if we are on the fringe. Yes, there will always be a need for ACISTE in some capacity, but will evolve. The mainstream is very important, that this be taught in every hospital, in every psychology course, to be aware of this population, just as you would study alcoholism, or you would study addictions, or you would study depression, or you would study, it's not that it's a mental issue, but it needs to, there is a need for this, for people to help them integrate these experiences so they're not suffering. So that's the long-term and the short-term vision right there.
Elaine, I would just like to emphasize what you said. You know, working with experiencers one-on-one and in groups as long as I have, I cannot agree with you more of the suffering and the trauma of having an unsupported STE and the consequences of it. You know, I've talked to people literally all over the world about their experiences, and some of the very heartbreaking consequences that happen because first responders are not educated, doctors are not educated, mental health professionals are not educated. I talked to a woman in a different country whose child was taken away from her when her experience happened, when her child was a small infant. That was over 10 years ago, and she's never seen that child again. And that may sound like an extreme occasional example, but unfortunately, they're not. Unfortunately, I mean, we can all remember the stories of what mental health was like in this country in the 1800s, you know, in the early 1900s, what happened to people in institutions. And we're still treating experiencers in some of those very harsh and extreme ways around the world. And it's really heartbreaking. If people just had support, if the helping professionals were educated and had the understanding of what might be happening, and concurrently with whatever the physical or emotional expressions of that are, we could reduce the suffering for the experiencer and their families alike. It is so important.
Yeah, and it's also by not being educated, professionals can cause some real harm, and maybe they're maybe well-intentioned, but just being uneducated and talking about this experience with someone, some real harm can be done, and we've seen this. We've seen people that have their experience just dismiss and say, oh, that was just lack of oxygen to the brain, or that was just, and we put the word just in front of it, where it's anything but just something. That alone can be extremely invalidating and cause people not to share it with anybody for years. And there's research that's shown that if you can't talk about something that's very important to you, a big change in your life, a positive trauma or a trauma, if you can't share it, it causes internal stress. People need to talk, need to get it out there in a safe place where they're understood, and also talk about it with people who are informed. So this research and education is so, I can't emphasize enough how important it is that be done. Yeah, there was something else I was going to say, I forgot, so I'll go back to it.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. One of the things that comes to mind for me too is, you know, there's this whole other part of our culture that is seemingly seeking the spiritual awakening experience, maybe somewhat naively, not knowing what that is. But often these practices that are becoming mainstream, like Dina mentioned earlier, yoga meditation practices, casual psychedelic use, ayahuasca retreats and whatnot, they are creating experiences for people. And guess what? The magic is not necessarily in the experience, it's in how you integrate it. And if we don't have systems set up for integration, there's all kinds of chaos that ensues, including, unfortunately, mental health diagnoses and the family trauma and everything else that comes from having an experience that is so altering and not having a safe way and a community to help you understand, organize, and integrate it. So I think we're looking at two different ends of the spectrum, and we need to get everybody talking the same language so we can make sense of it together.
Katrina, could you talk more about our upcoming conference in Atlanta?
Absolutely. So we're about to launch our registration for our Atlanta conference, which is coming up at the end of this year, November 14th to 16th. We're going to be having a certification day that Sunday, November 17th, post-conference, which if you attend the entire conference and stay for the certification day, you can become certified as an ACISTE professional with your whatever your specialty is, be it mental health, life coaching, spiritual guidance, counseling. So I encourage you to keep an eye out, get on our mailing list for information if you're not already on there, and you can send us an email at info@aciste.org, or you can just go to our website and type in your email address and confirm to start receiving our newsletters, which will have information about how to register for that as well. We're in the process of getting our proposals sorted through. So we have really wonderful people who are planning to come and present with us, and I'm excited about the diversity of this year. I think it's going to be a wonderful experience, as it always is, and a heart-opening experience. And, you know, we will be offering continuing education for those of you that need it. It's a good excuse to come join us, and I think Atlanta will be beautiful in November, which is going to be helpful as well.
Thank you. Yes, I'm really looking forward to the conference, as I do every year. Like you said, it is a heart-opening experience for sure. It's not your typical academic conference. And I think that's one of the things that I found so incredibly lovely about ACISTE, is that heart space is created in everything that we do. It's really beautiful. And Dina, did you have something that you wanted to share? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw your hand out of the corner of my eye. I'm trying to read the comments and everything in between.
No, but I will support what you just said about the conference. I mean, I have to say, when I went to the first conference that I went to in 2016, I was just blown away. I mean, there were just such a sense of connection between colleagues who didn't know each other, but as they got to know each other over the course of the 4 or 5 days, and you know, many of those colleagues are also experiencers. So I think it's a wonderful way to connect and gain support as a professional in whatever field you're in, to get to come together with colleagues who you really have some unique connection with, perhaps. As well as for those of you who might step into that conference thinking, I just want to learn more about this topic. I don't think I've had any big spiritual experience. And you know, what you learn there may help you discover that, oh, there are things that I have had in my life that have really shifted my perspective in a radical way, but I just didn't know how to, I didn't have the language, or I didn't know how to honor that. So I encourage everybody who is interested to come to the conference this year in Atlanta. I think it's going to be a particularly good one, so I'm looking forward to it myself.
Yeah, I want to just mention the different way that we structure the mainstream speakers. We try to get those who have conducted research, important research that we feel all mental health professionals should know about. And then we have breakout sessions for a lot of people that are in private practice who have sharing their results working with their clients, or a particular specialty area in the past. And we record all of our speakers and place their recordings for available on sale after the conference from our website. And one of the shorter term goals is to take from all of our previous contents, put them together in an online CEU course. So that valuable information, that valuable experience from maybe some people who didn't get to attend can experience that, the same sort of resonance to it as well. and maybe come in person. We've had people like who come every year, and every year is different because we have different speakers, even though they're talking on important topics. It's not the same conference every year because we bring in as many people that are qualified in the field as we can. So it's rich. It's really rich. We also move it around the country so that, because we started with mental health professionals, they're maybe just licensed in their own state, and we wanted experiencers to have available to them mental health professionals certified in their state. So that's why we keep moving it around the country, even though it's relevant to anybody. So those are just some aspects I wanted to mention.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a wonderful conference. So I really encourage you to keep an eye out for registration, which again will be opening up very soon in a couple of days. And I think it's important for us to come together and have these conversations in person as well. There's a whole different level of deepening that happens. And it really is, as much as it's an intellectual experience of learning the research and hearing from experiencers, I also think that it's really valuable to just be in the energy of that collective, because I think that's part of how we're all moving into this experience together and gaining the momentum to move our fields forward, to embrace training the professionals to serve experiencers. I think that's really what it comes down to. One thing I want to say is ACISTE is really, we're all volunteers right now. And so if you're watching this, or if you're at all interested, you're as much a part of ACISTE as we are. And we really need your help. We really need volunteers. We have many tasks that need to be covered. We are all otherwise obligated to support ourselves in other ways, so our time is limited. We, of course, welcome financial contributions that are tax deductible. You can become a member of ACISTE, and you can get your certification with ACISTE, and you can help us out in that way, as well as attending the conference. If there are any other ideas you have, any other ways you'd like to get involved, any unique skill sets that you can offer for a nonprofit organization, please be in touch. Don't hesitate to be in touch with us. Again, the email info@aciste.org. And save the date for Atlanta conference, November 14 to 16, and the 17th if you'd like to do the certification with us as well. Okay, I think that's it for today. Elizabeth, anything else you wanted to add?
No, we had one more question come in, but it's a pretty long answer, I think, and I don't think we're going to have time for it. But I will certainly get back to you privately and answer your question. I do think that we touched a lot of topics today, a very broad swath of topics related to STEs. And I'm just so excited that everybody showed up today. You can see the replay of this on our Facebook page. Later tomorrow, we'll have the replay up. And if you ever have any questions, or if there's anything that we could do for you, please contact us at info@aciste.org. If you're not on our newsletter email list and you would like to do that, be sure you email me and let me know. If you'd like to get on our experiencer forum and have safe private conversations with other experiencers, please email me at that address as well, and we'll get you on the forum. I think that's it, Katrina.
All right, wonderful. So thank you all, and thank you so much, Dina and Yolene, for being with us. And we miss you, Suzanne, and we can't wait to welcome you to the board, Lydia, and hope to see you all in person at the conference soon or online soon. Also, keep an eye on Facebook. We make a lot of announcements there. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at ACISTE1. So look forward to being in touch and continuing the conversation. Have a great day, everyone.